Hi, it's Susan Nicely, and welcome to today's episode of iTravelNurse TV. Hey, nice to see ya. The topic for today's episode is profit margin. Keep in mind, profit margin is one of the three influencing factors that will ultimately affect your pay. So this is very important. Okay, profit margin. What is profit margin? Profit margin is what a company, a travel nurse company or an agency has determined that they want to make off placing you on an assignment or placing you for an agency shift. Okay, now how they determine that is based on their intrinsic business plan. Okay, so it's a little complicated. So what they have to first do is that they have to determine how much money they're going to make off you, usually per hour, how much they're going to bill off you on their bill rate. Okay, profit margin, like I said, comes secondary. Now keep in mind, every travel nurse company or every agency, they have their own expenses as well. These people that are calling you for travel nurse jobs, called recruiters, a company has to pay their salary. They have to pay for the building that the company is operating out of. They have to pay for electricity. They may have to pay for water. They have to pay for utilities. They have to pay and premiums for business insurance. And so in the event their business were to get sued, they have that expense. So they have their own expenses as well. So anything from utilities to rent to any kind of lease agreements, health insurance, cost of their employees, being in compliance with places like Joint Commission or regulatory bodies that manage businesses, all cost money. So these are called operating expenses that a business has to endure based on them being just in business in general. So once a travel, and then that varies. It varies from company to company. If you look at these big companies, like for example, let's just say Cross Country, they were one of the pioneers for the travel nurse industry. Now they are a large company and they may have higher overhead based on the fact that they're a large company than say the mom and pop shop that might be in your neighborhood. Now there's pros and cons to going with a larger company, say like Cross Country or American Mobile Medical Express versus the mom and pop shop, but that will be discussed in another episode. But just keep in mind that each company has their own expenses. So after they have determined what their own expenses are, then they also have their profit margin. Their goal is to keep their operating expenses like utilities, employees, insurance, and that as cost effective as possible to increase their profit margin. Now keep in mind that every travel nurse company or every agency has an owner. They may have a private owner or they may have an investor group. Some of these companies like Cross Country is actually traded on the Dow, so they have investors that are looking to gain a return based on them buying stock in their company. So these companies, like I said, like Cross Country, has to answer to an investor board as well. So that will ultimately determine what their profit margin is. And when you're looking at companies that are not maybe either privately owned and have to answer to an investor board, they're going to really be, how should we say, more loyal to the investors as far as a profit margin that they might even be to you. But like I said, there's pros and cons to going with those kinds of companies. But just keep in mind that they have to determine their profit that they want to make off you working for them after all of their expenses, their operating expenses, are paid. Now, how will you find out what a company's profit margin is? You probably won't. Now, profit margin, how much a company is profiting off of you, is not something that is usually disclosed to a nurse. They're not going to say, okay, we're billing the hospital $100 an hour and we're going to make $20 an hour in a profit margin off of you working for us. They're not going to tell you that. But you have to sort of, when you learn more about the industry and you study it and you see the differences in the companies and you see the perks that you get as a travel nurse, or you see fluctuations in pay, you could probably assume that one company, one travel nurse company or one agency might have a higher profit margin than say another. But just keep in mind, they're in the business to make money. This is the business of healthcare, and you are replaceable. You as a nurse, be it an RN, LPN, I don't care how many years of experience you have. I don't care how many credentials you have. I don't care if you're a CCRN. I don't care if you're CEN. I don't care if you have a BSN, a master's, TNCC. I don't care if you've worked in all of the major facilities nationwide. I mean, hell, I used to work at Duke University Medical Center, one of the top 10 hospitals in the country, as staff. That does not affect my pay today as a travel nurse. So they don't care about that. Keep in mind, these companies are in business to make money. They're looking at making money for them. So their profit margin and how they operate and what their expenses might be is ultimately going to trickle down and affect your pay. So take a look at that. That's today's episode of iTravelNurse TV Profit Margins. One thing you're going to want to keep in mind down the road and start thinking about down the road is how you can determine your own profit margin and start operating your own nursing business as an individual by thinking like a business, even if you're working for another company. I'll see you next time.